Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Is he really coming? Jesus. Well, he doesn't always. That's a good question. Oh, that's one. Yeah, never mind. I'm not going to touch that one now. God, speaking of anonymity, for a business conference, guys, the only way you protected my anonymity is you misspelled my last name in the program. You might want to take that up with your printer. I'm delighted to be here. I'm delighted to be in Oregon. Thank your committee. I want to thank your committee for asking me, whoever the committee is. And I usually forget to do that. So I was coming back quietly from my room, and I was thinking about, God, isn't it interesting that the only battle that I have ever had, the real war in sobriety for me, has been with me. It hasn't been with wives, ex-wives. It hasn't been with employers, ex-employers. It hasn't been with relatives or friends or associates. The only true battle I've ever had to fight in sobriety has been with me. And it's interesting how every time it seems that we hear the phrase, the alcoholic who still suffers, somehow people think that means drinking. And I didn't really suffer till I got here. Sobriety has been a blessing for a lot of people. I don't necessarily associate with them socially, but it has been a blessing for them. And it is after a while, but in the beginning, for a lot of us, it's very difficult. And I like to talk about that. I like to talk about the first 5 years. Because if you get through them, you have a shot at 6, 7, and 8, which are really a bitch. From there, it gets a little better for a while. It's like, well, the thing that happens here that I've discovered for me, which is really interesting, I mean, I spent my entire life trying to reach an anesthetized state, In other words, I did everything humanly possible to reach that kind of just not feeling anything down and not feeling anything up, just preferably not feeling anything. I have been under the assumption, even in sobriety for many years, that peace of mind meant feeling nothing. The whole thing shakes. If you're wondering, it's an eerie platform, And I have days of security and days of staggering insecurity. I was lucky tonight. I always bring 2 ties so I can drive myself crazy. Before I speak, but I brought the wrong belt, so I had to wear one specific tie, so it worked out. For those of you who have problems in front of the closet, you will identify. I discovered that I have one real enemy in the world, and it's my mind. This son of a bitch is absolutely, incredibly filled with misinformation and awesomely destructive. To me, it's never done a lot of harm to anybody else. It just seems to like to come after me. And it began in the beginning in AA. It's like I learned something. It took me years to realize this. But at my very first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, this sucker started to put the pressure on me, to put the lid on me. Anything to keep me down, anything to keep me from growing, anything to keep me from happiness, anything to keep me from anything worthwhile. It likes to spend most of its time thinking. In fact, it would prefer to do nothing but think. Participation is not anything it's interested in. I love the saying that life is what's happening while you're busy sitting home making plans. Anyway, I arrived at my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. I was 26 years of age. I weighed 135 pounds, which is about 40 pounds lighter than I am now, which means I look like a skeleton. And my brain was fried. I was living outdoors, and I didn't care. I was gone. Everything was burned out. I was burned out. My body was burned out. My mind was burned out. Then I wound up in my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. This is very interesting. You take somebody from this place of despair and desperation, and you take them to an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting where people are drinking coffee and chit-chatting and carrying on, and you would think that they would have a sense of relief or a sense of comfort or a sense of well-being or a sense of something good. Right? No. I sat in this first meeting and they brought me coffee. I mean, literally, I was one of the shakers, who could not pick it up. And as I'm slurping my coffee and I'm looking around this meeting in my mind, this fine-tuned machinery up here, surveys this AA meeting and says to me, Jesus, we've really sunk to the bottom this time. This is the end of the road here. And I have agreed with my mind for 26 years up to this point, and I'm not going to stop now. So I go, oh, yeah, right, you're right. Well, what's happened to me in that brief split second in my first meeting is interesting because it's tragic. My mind, in essence, has taken away any real initiative I might have to do anything with this program. Because what it has said to me is, look, AA and sobriety is something you do between drinking and using and dying. You give up drinking and using, then you stay sober in AA, and then you die. So this is what you do until you die. Well, if it's the end of the road, if it's a holding action between drinking and using, how much energy are you going to put into it? How much real, honest-to-God effort are you going to apply to the program of AA? I mean, are you really going to read the book, or are you only going to read the book when your sponsor's standing over your shoulder? Are you really going to work the steps, or are you only going to work the steps when you're suicidal and you have no other choice but to work the steps? Are you going to approach the program with enthusiasm and say, God, this is terrific. There's a way of life here. I can become a new person. I can have everything wonders. I can have joy and happiness and beauty and prosperity. Wow, let's work this program. I said, how many meetings do I have to go to? 7 a week. I didn't have anything else to do. Didn't know anybody. Didn't have any place to live. And I'm already worried about having to go to too many meetings. I was going to interfere with my social life. Well, if you're blessed in the beginning in AA, if you're really sick, the first 90 days to 6 months can be relatively easy. Because if you're totally burned out, you don't care. It seems like the machinery is a little bit quiet. And you can be led easily from place to place. It's kind of like you go to a meeting and they say, oh, sit here. You go, okay, yeah, great. You sit there. Somebody says, move the chair. Oh, yeah, okay, great. I'll take the chair. You want to wash cups? Yeah, sure. Fuck, I'll wash cups. You don't have anything else to do, so you just kind of go along with whatever the program is. In about 90 days or 6 months, you'll begin to think a little bit. And some of the anxiety will start to rise. For me, the whole first year was pretty numb. But I didn't do a lot either. I mean, I didn't write an inventory the first year I was sober. I didn't surrender myself lovingly into the care of God's hands. I was scared to death of God. I wanted nothing to do with Him because you guys had the worst phrase in the world here. You said, God as you understand Him. I mean, look at who that's being said to. Look at where we come from, I mean, we come rolling in the doors of AA with sin written all over us. And somebody says, talk to God. And you go, yeah, be out of your fucking mind, About what? How well I've been doing lately, My capacity to do unto others before they do unto me, What do we discuss here? Adultery, murder, robbery, what, So I had no desire to talk to God. I wasn't even the least bit interested. And the first year just kind of went by, just sort of, a lot of anger. And I did a lot of things because my sponsors instructed me. They always used the yardstick, either you do this or you die. I can grasp that. That's the kind of simplicity that you put the chairs away after the meeting or you die. I can function. That's easy. You know, I can handle anything like that. And when you end up with the end of your first year, they know now they can begin to see the real intensity start to rise in you. And they know what's required now is activity. So they'll take you to an institutional committee meeting and say, they take you in and show you off, right? We got this one, he's got a year. They give you panels that nobody else in the institutional committee will take, because they're all a horror for one reason or another, you know. And they launch you into the world of activity. Now you're out carrying the message in God-forsaken places to people you don't even want to know. But you're operating under the same threat that you were moving chairs under, which is really simple. If you don't go back to these institutions where they wear blue and brown and carry the message, you're going to wind up living back in these institutions where they wear blue and brown. So you take your goddamn book and you get in your car and you go to the institution and you carry the message with the best possible attitude. Which, by the way, in case I forget to mention it, you're in your first couple of years, you don't have to like doing this stuff. It's only important that you do it. If you're going to wait until this here, if the mind says, oh, gee, I think it would be fun to make coffee for the meeting, you could die. It's okay to make coffee for an AA meeting even if you're giving serious consideration to poisoning the entire group. But during this 2-year period of time, I knew that I was going to have to form some sort of a relationship with God. But the problem was, I was very afraid of God, because the only God I understood was the old man in the throne keeping score. Any idiot knew that God and I weren't even. The state of California and I weren't even. It doesn't take a lot of logic to figure out you're not even with God. So I kept trying to think of ways to approach this God. What do you say without risking your life? You know, surrender, total surrender was a little scary, because my mind said, look, if you let go completely, if you totally turn it over to God, you will wind up 20 years sober, working in a men's 12-step house, washing dishes, celibate, and talking about gratitude. And with that as a goal, I was hesitant to just kind of give it all up, you know, and say, here, you know. Also, standing in a large open area saying, take me, I'm yours, seemed a little ridiculous, too. But I would listen to people in the meetings, and he was working for the people in the meetings. You've all heard him. And they're sincere, you know. They come into the meeting, and they get up at a participation meeting or something, and you're sitting there 3/4 dead, right? The anxiety is so bad, the tension is so great, your shoulder blades are pinned together. Just, you know, your head is cocked over to one side. There's no relief in sight. 8 Tylenol have done nothing for the pain you feel. And you know your life is kind of like a bottle of nitroglycerin just being thrown from one child to another, you know, waiting for one of these kids to drop it. And this guy walks in the meeting and he says, well, I had a horrible day today. It started out, it was really a bear. You know, I got up this morning, went in and sat down, and with my orange juice, my wife gave me divorce papers. Depressed and saddened, I left home, I went to work, got to the office, and I was informed by my boss they were cutting back, they no longer needed my services. Now I lost my job. I went out in the parking lot to get my car to drive somewhere, God only knows where, after this kind of a day, and my car had been repossessed. Being totally frustrated, not knowing what to do or where to go, I returned to the office building, went in the men's room, got on my knees, and said to this God, take it. It's all yours. I can't go one step further. I am here tonight to report my wife changed her mind. Everything's okay. My boss found some new dough. I got my job back. There was an error in bookkeeping, and they returned my car. Well, I would sit there, you know, on red alert, listening to this and think, that's what I need. That's what I got to have. You know, I need somebody like that who can fix things for me, you know. And I would go home I mean knowing. I wasn't walking around oblivious to this. I knew I needed God to take care of me or I was in a lot of trouble. And I would get home, you know, when you go home and you overlap the drapes so no one will see you praying. Get in the bedroom and I'd get ready to pray, and this time I was really going to do it, and I'd get on my knees and I'd fold my hands and I'd bow my head, and the minute I bowed my head, one of the voices would say, or all of them would say in unison, "Forget it. God works for the good people, and you are not one of the good people." And so I would get up and I would leave the bedroom not having said one word to this God. And it's interesting because where the hell did I get the idea I'm not one of the good people? I mean, where did that come from? What happened to me that somewhere down the line I lost sight that I'm a good person? Where is it back there? And I hope to get to it if I remember at some point later on. Because at one point I was really a beautiful child, a bright-eyed, curly-headed, blue-eyed, gorgeous little boy, just standing there, you know, like, wow, look at here. I'm okay, the earth is okay, the world is okay, everything's all right. Once upon a time, I had all of that. And somewhere down the line, I reached a place where I could not even pray to God to ask for help because I had so little self-esteem, I didn't think I deserved His help. If somebody said to me today, after 21 years of sobriety, what do you think is the alcoholic's number one problem? I would have to say self-esteem. I'm convinced, beyond a shadow of a doubt, both drinking and using, that's it. And I think it's serious in sobriety because I think it keeps a lot of us from really getting anything. I had an experiment here about 6 months ago. I took 4 guys to a couple of AA meetings. A couple of them are psychiatrists who are from back east and involved in a research project. And they are aware of AA, but they've never been to a meeting and have never really had any real one-on-one confrontations of any kind with alcoholics. And a couple of very spiritual guys who have been walking a spiritual path for probably 40 years each. And I took them a couple of AA meetings, and afterwards we went out, and I said, okay, what do you think? I hope you're ready for this. Total impartial observers to our organization. They said, Jesus Christ, we can't believe it. Here these people are, walking miracles. A literally terminal disease has been lifted from their shoulders. They have been saved from a disease that can kill them. The worst possible destruction in the world has been ripped from their lives, and yet here they sit in these goddamn meetings and they're continuing to destroy themselves. They drink 170 barrels of coffee. They smoke 6 packs of cigarettes. They eat sugar by the 5-pound bag and walk around and talk about recovery. These guys were stunned, you know. And somewhere, it seems that once we find out we're worth taking care of, we have a tendency to eliminate some of these things from our life. Anyway, I'll get back to that, I hope. At about 2.5 years of sobriety, I went to a meeting one night, and I've talked with friends lately who assure me the speaker did not tell this story. I have lived my life by it for, 18.5 years. So it doesn't really matter who the hell told the story. I heard the story. I don't know whether the speaker told the story or not. But it helped me. It gave me a foot in the right direction. It started me on the path, or at least the path I needed to be on. A lot of you have heard it, but I'll repeat it because I love the story, because I still believe it. And it's a simple story about 2 guys drinking in a bar. Well, let me preface it with something else. My talk rambles, so those of you who can keep up, great, and those of you who can't, you won't probably understand me anyway. I had a sponsor who was rather cruel and very ferocious. And he had one of these voices that you could hear him for 4 blocks away. I literally saw him put the microphone aside in an auditorium of 1,000 people in a penitentiary anniversary meeting because he didn't need the microphone in this hall of 1,000 people. So when he'd take your inventory for you at the back of the meeting, it was not uncommon that the whole group would know what you had done. It wasn't uncommon that the neighbors would know what the hell you had done. And yet the only time this man ever spoke gently was when he was trying to explain the kingdom of God to me. And he'd get me off in a corner, and he'd be really quiet, and he'd say, look, you got to stop looking outside of yourself. The kingdom of God is inside of you. That's where it is. It is no place else. And he would say this very loving and very gently. And I don't know how you handle your sponsors, but I always nodded when I didn't understand, you know. I just agreed, yeah, yeah, I got it. I understand, sure, yeah, I got it. All the time I'm going, yeah, I understand, I got it. I'm thinking, he's got to be kidding. I'm no good. If God is good, how can something good be inside something no good? This is bullshit. I don't understand what he's saying. But I'd be going, yeah, I got it. Yeah, sure, I understand. It's okay. So that would be the message that he had laid on me. So now when I go to the meeting and I hear the speaker tell the story about these two men drinking in a bar in Alaska. And one of the men was an atheist, and the other was a very religious man. And eventually their conversation swung around to God. Then the atheist looked at the religious man and he says, well, I don't believe in your God. The religious man says, why not? The atheist said, I gave your God a chance to prove himself to me once, and he didn't do it. The religious man says, in what manner did you give God a chance to prove himself? Atheist says, well, about 6 months ago, I was lost about 150 miles north of town in a blizzard. And I knelt down in the snow and I looked at the sky and I said, God, if there is one, I'm lost and I'm going to die. The religious man looks at him, smiles a very knowing smile. He says, why, you must believe you're here. Atheist says, nah, some goddamn Eskimo came along, showed me the way back to town. Well, I heard this story, I lit up like a Christmas tree. I finally got it, right? God is in me, He's in everybody. If He's in everybody, the only instrument He's got is people. And I'm saying, this is far out. I understand that because Eskimos got me to my first AA meeting. I couldn't call AA. I had the phone number in my pocket. I had a dime in my pocket that I wouldn't spend on drugs or alcohol. I'd go to the phone booth 50 times. I'd drop the dime in. I'd think about dialing the number, hear the dial tone, hang up, take my dime back, and walk away because I couldn't call somebody I didn't know in an office somewhere I didn't know where it was and say, I can't make it. See? That'd be admitting defeat. I had never admitted defeat in my life. I wasn't going to start now, right? So one day I'm sitting in my little doorway in Pasadena in this state of being, dying one day at a time, unable to call AA but aware of it. I want you to listen to God's story, not mine. I hear a voice say to me, hey, what are you doing in the doorway, man? And I look up, and here's this guy who owes me a fortune, right? Because I used to play Robin Hood when I was stealing. And he and his wife and kids had been on welfare ever since I'd known him. I'd laid a lot of money off on him, and he was into me for a few $1,000s. And he says, man, you can't stay here. Come stay with me and the wife. Well, this is Eskimo number one, right? Just shows up. I can go home with him because he owes it to me. It's his duty to take me out of the goddamn doorway. It's the code of the streets. I mean, I'm not accepting charity. I'm not admitting defeat. Everything's okay, see. We'll die for image. Literally die to look good. Also not participate in life in order to look good. Anyhow. Because participation, you might look foolish. You know, you might do the wrong dance step or something. Says he who doesn't dance well anyway. Oh, Jesus. That'd have to come out. Anyhow. It's not safe up here. He takes me to his apartment, which is a one-bedroom thing with there's the wife and the 6 kids and the cockroaches I brought with me and those that live there. And I'm sitting that night on his couch and I'm sick and I'm shaking and I'm falling apart. And I said, God, one of these days I got to call AA and do something about my drinking. And he says, there's a girl down the hall goes to AA. This is 1962. I had no conception of what a girl that went to AA looked like. I had a couple of ideas, you know. But I couldn't imagine because I'd never been to a meeting. The only place I'd ever been where meetings were, you either went because it was part of your jacket, and if you ever wanted to see the parole board, you know, you went. Or the winos who were just crippled up and drug off to the meetings because they had nothing else to do, right? So I went down the hall, Eskimo number 2, right? To see what a girl looks like that goes to AA. Now, God, in His infinite wisdom, had enough intelligence. He knew that it had been some darling little damsel in frills and lace standing on the other side of the door. I would have lied. I would have had to lie. I couldn't have stopped myself from lying. It would have been automatic. Haven't you ever found yourself in a conversation you wished you weren't in? You know, the mouth is just going and you're saying, oh, God, no, no. Am I really saying that? Please shut up. So I walked down the hall, and God knew that if this had been some fox, I would have said, "Oh, God, I understand that you belong to a fellowship that deals with the treatment of alcoholism, and I have a father who has a rather serious problem with alcohol. Perhaps you could share with me some information that might enable me to give my poor sick father a hand," right? You know, in the same clothes I've been in for 3 months, sleeping indoors. Always, think we're cool. Anyhow, my Eskimo, the girl that opened this door is big enough to break every bone in my body. She stood about 6'2", 6'3", weighed about 235 pounds, built like a fullback, just solid. Short black hair and tattoos all the way down both arms and both legs. She had a half-full pint of booze in her hand. This is my introduction to Alcoholics Anonymous. We're concerned about what the newcomer will think, right? I've been sober ever since, I'll tell you that. Worked for me. I looked at her, I was right at home because I could talk to her because she was street people, say. And that's where I was coming from, was the streets. And I looked at this girl and I said, I understand that you go to AA. I'm curious about this AA thing. She looked me right in the eyes, holding this half-full pint of booze, and said, "AA will work if you want it, and I am not ready to quit drinking." Made sense to me. I thought, Jesus, if I was a big tough broad, I wouldn't give it up either, I mean, I'm 135 pounds and 3/4 dead. That's the only reason I'm thinking about giving it up, If I had an ounce of hope left, I'd go for it, but I didn't. So she stuck me in a car. She felt a responsibility for the sobriety she had. She took me to an AA meeting, okay? So, now we come back to 2.5 years, and I've just heard the Eskimo story. I go home, and I'm feeling really good. It's like, okay, God is in me, He's in everybody. It means He works through people. Everything's okay. I'm bopping home. I feel good for the first time in 2.5 years. Pardon me. Help is on the way, right? It's okay, God, I don't have to do this anymore myself. Get home, sit down in the chair. I read a thing in the paper a few months back where some psychiatrist said that who had written a book said the armchair is the thinker's spaceship. No, the neurotic spaceship. Remember that next time you go home, sit down to work out a problem. Find yourself on another continent deep, in the jungle hunting wild animals. Screw reality. Anyhow, I go home armed with all this new information about how wonderful it is to have this God and be in everybody so it can help me out. And I sit down in my chair. In my mind, once again, the committee is there ready for me, right? And they say, "Well, that's all very good about God being inside of you, but dummy, there's 3 major areas of your life that God is not interested in." So I say, "What are they?" I don't ask questions like that of my mind anymore. I haven't for years. For about the last 5 years, I've tried very hard to make the only question I ever ask my mind, what is your source of information? I mean, for a 10th grade education, the son of a bitch talks all the time, about everything, and it really doesn't know much, It's only when it speaks out loud it gets really embarrassing. It would talk about physics in a room full of physicists, it doesn't care. Oh, yeah, I think, it'll take both sides of any issue on any given day, I can wake up in the morning and watch the 8 o'clock news and say, screw the boat people, send them back to Vietnam. I can watch it on the 6 o'clock news and be making out a check as a contribution to help them out, Then people wonder why sobriety is so stressful. See, I missed all that when I was loaded. Expect us to walk around here like everything's okay. How's things? Oh, yeah, it's okay, I've only had 17 debates with myself today and lost 16 of them. So I say to my mind, what are these 3 areas of my life that God isn't interested in? My mind says, well, the first thing is money. God doesn't care about money. God and money are not synonymous. Any idiot knows that. I thought about it for a minute. I'd watched a lot of Christian television and decided my mind was right. Poverty and God go hand in hand. If you're poor, you're blessed. So I figured, okay, I accept that. I said, what else? Said, employment. God does not care where you work. I thought about that for a minute. I try not to think about anything nowadays either if I can avoid it. Anything logical to me is very bad for me, usually. I thought about it for a while, and it made sense to me because I thought, well, God's got this whole huge planet here filled with people, all of whom have problems, all of whom need help, all of whom need His love and guidance. What the hell does He care where you punch the clock? I mean, it makes good sense, right? Logical to me. I accepted it. I said, what else? My mind said relationships. God doesn't care about the women that you date as long as you don't intentionally harm any of your sisters and are, honest. I like that. Because I was having trouble in that area already anyway, Very hard to have a relationship with somebody else when you don't even know who you are. I'll get to that later. Anyhow. Well, now what my mind has done to me, now remember, I've been home alone. Nobody else has said this to me. No wife, no ex-wife, no mother, no father, no enemy, no neighbor. Nobody has done anything to me. I have been home alone by myself thinking. See, that's where it always starts. That's where the trouble always starts. What my head has done is fascinating. Because I had a lot of hostility the first few years I was sober, it seemed that my sponsors deemed it necessary on a number of occasions to give me the craziest guys they could find to sponsor. I had babies that had blown up buildings with people in them. Guys that used to bend the chairs at meetings. I remember sit and fold the back over on the aluminum chair because of tension. And these were always the guys I was talking to, at 12 o'clock at night in the parking lot trying to calm down, keep from killing the neighborhood, Now, these guys are wired like I am wired, and the one thing they will never do ever under any circumstances is make a middle-of-the-night phone call. They would die before they would call anybody at 3 a.m. and admit to pain. Okay? But over the 21 years I've been sober, on the rare occasions that I have gotten phone calls from these gorillas, right? At 3 o'clock in the morning, and the emotional pain has been so great they have drugged themselves across the carpeting by their fingernails to get to the phone, which they have pulled off the coffee table on the floor and dialed. And they get me on the phone, and they're just a mass of rage and tears and anger and sadness. And, oh, God, right, screaming in my ear. The source of these phone calls has always been one of three things. Money, employment, or women. Funny, the very three areas my mind told me I should take care of. God would handle all else. Well, I spent the next year and a half in AA armed with that philosophy. God is keeping me clean and sober. I will handle employment, money, and women. On my 4th birthday in AA, this is why I talk about the first 5 years a lot. On my 4th birthday in AA, having done the very best possible job I could in all three areas, brought all the intelligence, wit, and energy that any one human being could bring to all three areas. I had just been financially bankrupt through the courts. I was handling the money. My car had gone into bankruptcy also. I was working in a car wash for $1.25 an hour. I had started at $1.35. I was handling employment. And I had been without a relationship for a while. In fact, I'd been without a relationship for so long I couldn't even get anybody to go to coffee with me. You reach a point where you get a look in your eyes and they know it's bullshit when you say you want to talk about the third step, In fact, they see you coming from clear across the room, you're so crazed, They look for their sponsor immediately, help somewhere, I was sleeping on a couch in a guy's apartment who I didn't even particularly like, but the reason I was staying with him is that the apartment was 2 doors away from the car wash where I worked. So this is how successful I was at handling money, employment, and relationships. Friends asked me if I was going to take a cake, and as I had borrowed money from everybody I sponsored, when Central Office called me with a 12-step call, the guy first had to be sober, second had to have a car so he could pick me up so I could take him to the meeting. And people say, you're going to take a cake? I said, what the hell for? I mean, what am I going to do? I'm going to go to an open AA meeting and take a cake and say to the poor goddamn newcomer, here's what you can have after 4 years of sobriety. You can be broke working in a car wash for $1.25 an hour, no automobile, so horny your eyes are crossed. And from bouncing in and out off of car seats all day long, your hemorrhoids from sitting on concrete in institutions are coming back. So they gave me a cake at Sunday morning Glendale Sanitarium meeting where they felt even that would represent hope. An Eskimo drove through the car wash and said, what are you doing here? I said, I don't know. I'm the only one that speaks English. I have no idea what I'm doing here. And he says, look, I'll give you a job. It's a couple of blocks from here. We'll pay you 50 cents an hour more. I said, great. Prosperity is at hand, $1.75. I'm ready. So the job was a trim press operator. And I'll take a second to describe this job because I want you to understand my mental state at 4 years sober. I want you to see how sharp I was and how ready I was to tackle the world of commerce. A trim press operator in a die casting shop is a rather difficult job. Die cast it might be a wheel for an automobile or an ashtray for an airplane. It's stuff made of molten metal fired into dies under pressure. And because of that, there's a lot of excess metal around whatever it is the machine is made. The stuff comes down a little conveyor belt and lands in a box. And you have in front of you this huge hydraulic press. And what you do is you reach in this box and take out, say, an ashtray for an airplane, and you put it down in this die in this big machine. You take both hands because it requires 2 buttons. They don't want you to hurt yourself, right? You push. But being an alcoholic, compulsive smoker, I learned to hit one with a knee and, smoke. Anything to die. Why quit dying when I can, work at it on the job? So you hit both buttons, and this huge press comes crashing down, cuts all the unnecessary metal away. You take the part out, and you put it in this box here, and you reach over and get another one. That's it for 8 solid hours. You get one, put it here, push the buttons, take it out, and put it there, and I was delighted to have the job. I was thrilled to death. I thought, I'm okay here. I can handle this. Everything's going to be all right here. And I ran my little machine. And then they made me a die caster later on, and I became a die caster. But I still I had a little apartment on my own now. I still didn't have a car. I was still paying back support and back this and back that and financial amends, and didn't have a nickel to go anywhere, and couldn't have a checking account because I am of the philosophy if you have checks, you have money, and, it's... created a few small problems in early sobriety with misunderstanding bankers. And so my life wasn't thrilling, I was working as a die caster, and I was still angry, really angry. I came with a lot of anger, and I still had a lot of anger. And then I chased a guy through the plant one day with a piece of pipe. We had a small disagreement. And when I caught him, I looked at him, and I looked at the look in his eyes, and I thought, Jesus, I don't want to... What's going on? I don't want to live this way anymore. So I drove down to Laguna Beach to where a couple lives, and I was told earlier that, maybe after this meeting we'll have a moment of prayer for Chuck. I understand he can use it. But anyhow, at the time... I would never bother with Charlie. I loved him, but when I was crazy, I didn't have time for him because it took him too long to get to the point. I didn't have time to hear about the goddamn deer in the canyon belonging to him when I'm dying. You know what I mean? I would just go say hi, Chuck, and go straight through into the kitchen where Elsa was because you've got better answers, quicker from Elsa. And I looked at Elsa, I explained the whole thing. I said, God, I was at work today and I was really angry. I chased this guy with a piece of pipe, and looked at her. She looked me right in the eyes and she said, well, why don't you try going to work for God then instead of man? I'm always glad I ask her. And I said, yeah, okay, right the nod. Yeah, okay. What does that mean? I was desperate. I wouldn't have asked. What does that mean to go to work for God instead of man? She said, very simply, what would God ask of you if you worked for Him? It seems to me that He would want you to show up on time. He'd want you to treat everyone there like you would like to be treated. and expect nothing in return for your efforts, not even a paycheck. I left Laguna Beach armed with this information and drove back to Sherman Oaks, not thrilled, but understanding that this was now what I was going to have to do. And I embarked on going to work every morning, getting there on time, treating everybody like I wanted to be treated, and not expecting anything in return. In all honesty, only once did they surprise me with a paycheck. All the other times I knew it was coming. And usually was waiting. But I made a lot of guys nervous at work because the change in my attitude surprised them. I'd walk in the locker room in the morning, go to change, and I'd smile. I'd say, "Hi, how are you? Good morning. How's the wife and kids? Is the camper okay? Did you have a nice fishing trip?" All the crap I couldn't talk to them about before because I didn't understand any of it, didn't relate to any of it, hadn't done any of it, and didn't want to do any of it, you know. And they didn't want to talk about drug addiction, so we just never had anything to talk about at lunch. So I went a year this way at work, and it went okay. You know, I got along better with the guys, paid off a lot of bills, still didn't have a car, and I came home one night about 2 months away from my 5th birthday in AA, and I sat down on my bed in my apartment, and I wanted to die. And I don't say this as a joke, but for those of you who have had this kind of depression, you'll understand what I mean. The thought of suicide would have been a step up in the depression. Even considering a physical act would have been a level higher in the depression. I just wanted to sit in this spot on this bed in this apartment and die. 5 years sober. That's it. I'm through. I can't go on one more step. It's all over. And I had not yet hooked up that I was still dealing with money, employment, and women. See? But I was dying, and I couldn't understand why I was dying. So one more time I was desperate. I was absolutely panic-stricken. I had to have this God. I needed this God. Where was this God? And yet I was still very afraid because I thought, one of the things I did for about 4 years, I was convinced, and I don't even know where I got the idea, that if you knew the proper metaphysical terminology, God would love you. You know, if you could petition Him in the proper words, He'd help you. If you use the wrong words, you know, you're in trouble, right? So this night, sitting in his apartment on this bed, ready to die. Ready to die. I had done it all as good as I knew how to do it. I had worked the program as good as I knew how to do it. I had followed my sponsor's instructions as good as I knew how to do it. I had gone to work and been as good a guy as I knew how to be, and all I could think of, fucked! Which always will shatter a couple of people. But obviously, God doesn't care what words you use. And that was it. That was the prayer. Because I knew if there was no God, I was going to die. It was that simple. I had reached the end, baby. It was over. Absolutely over. Got up the next morning, went to work, placed a brand new Allen head wrench in a brand new Allen head bolt. It slipped. I went backwards against one of the furnaces, crushed 2 vertebrae in my back, was taken to the emergency hospital in Van Nuys. I'm laying in the emergency hospital in Van Nuys. The doctors are saying, well, you can't go back to die casting anymore. You can't lift anything heavy. You can't stand for long periods of time. Because my back was already a mess just from the streets, right? You know, crushed vertebrae, fractured pelvis, bones that have been shattered by bullets. Just generally not in the best condition. When I run, I have a gait all my own. People say they can spot me from a mile away. I don't know if that's true or not. After all the doctors get out of this little cubicle, I'm laying in the emergency room, my mind one more time, right? It's right there to be helpful and supportive of me in all situations. Screams at me. It says, see, you goddamn dummy, you surrendered to God last night and today you broke your back. And this voice down in here, somewhere inside of me, said to my mind, why don't you shut up? And for once I agreed with the lower voice. I said, yeah, God, I'm really tired of listening to all this. So what I did, and I didn't have any help with any of this. This was on pure instinct. What I did is I decided that I was going to just go along as if breaking my back was a good deal. You know? I mean, I didn't know any better. I was so burned out. What the hell, right? Maybe a broken back is okay. You know? How do I know that this isn't what God has in store for me? Breaking my back is fine. I'm going to do what's put in front of me to do. I'm not going to question anything. I'm going to know my life is in divine order. God is in charge. Everything is perfect. Screw it. I give up. Which I think was the point of the whole first 5 years. I missed it. So now I go get all the braces and crap I have to wear on my back. I go get my disability insurance. I go file for vocational rehabilitation, and that becomes a zoo, right? We had a lot of problems, Voc Rehab and me. One is I took 5 aptitude tests over a period of 5 weeks and came out 5 different people. And I wasn't being cute, I wasn't being funny, I wasn't playing games, I was honestly answering the questions that day. So they didn't know what the hell to do with me. You know, they said, oh, you should be a social worker. I said, the state of California says I'm a homicidal social psychopath, for Christ's sake. You know, you got to be kidding, you know. Help who? With what, you know? So I go in, every week, and I go back every week, and they got nothing for me to do, and I got nothing to do, and I get my disability insurance, and I don't know what's going on, but I just keep the attitude that everything's okay. My life is in perfect order, even though it doesn't make sense to me. That is the single most valuable prayer to me in my sobriety today. That my life is in perfect order, even though it doesn't make sense to me. Because I find if I will repeat that prayer and use it until I believe it, those things that aren't in order will be changed that quick. Once I start to declare it. Okay, so I go on for 6 months. We roll into December. No job. Voc Rehab doesn't know what the hell to do with me. Still getting my disability insurance. Still no car. Still living in a little apartment on Sherman Way. And one night I'm sitting there with a TV guide. And I open up the TV guide, and there's an ad in the TV guide that says, how would you like to be a writer? And I looked at this ad, and something down here inside said, God, that's a great idea. Let's try that. I said, well, right? The mind, of course, went berserk. Oh, don't be silly. It's always there to help you when you want to try anything new. So I go into Voc Rehab. I take my little ad out of TV guide, and I hand it to my counselor in a wheelchair. I said, here's what I want to do, right? She laughed so hard. She almost fell out of her wheelchair, right? Support from Voc Rehab. Because she knew it was ludicrous. Absolutely ludicrous. Because she knew everything there was to know about me. She had my jacket. She knew I had a 10th grade education. She knew I had failed English ever since the 4th grade. She knew I was a phonetic speller because of all the things I had filled out for her. She thought it was insanity, right? Listen carefully to all this. Because God in His infinite wisdom had even outfoxed bureaucracy. Okay? She took the ad into her boss. Well, I was the only guy left on the Van Nuys office Voc Rehab rolls from July. They had even placed people from August, September, and October, right? I was the black mark. He would have paid for basket weaving for me. He didn't care. Just get him anything. So he said, send for his books for him. We'll pay for it. Now, I want you to listen to all the planning that's gone into the career here. I get my books, I sit down, and I start to write a short story. I don't think I'd ever read a short story. It was terrible, by the way. It showed that I had never read a short story. It was really bad. But I'm reading my books. I don't know what the hell to do. I'm reading my books, Just going along best I can. The mind is saying, Jesus, one more thing you can fail at. And I'm just kind of letting it talk, trying not to pay a lot of attention to it, And I'm reading through my books, and my book says, For a new writer, it's very important that they write for about a subject, for a medium that they're familiar with. For a medium that they're familiar with. And I thought, well, God, I never read much, but I watched a lot of TV. So I set aside my short story, which was terrible, and I tried to write an idea for Bonanza, which is about as bad as the short story. I wrote it complete with dialect as a Chinese cook. It was cute. It was, So I'm reading my books on, it's the best I can do is just keep reading the books. And I read to get a little further in the books, and it says, not only is it essential that the new writer write about, for a medium that he's familiar with, he should write about a subject he's familiar with. I thought, oh, well, God, I never lived in the Old West. I'll write about crime. Something I know something about, So I start watching the cop shows on TV, and I pick on Ironsides. I say, great, okay, I'll write a story for Ironsides. So I sit down and I think, well, what have I not seen on Ironsides that I'd like to see, or on a cop show on TV? And I thought, well, I've never seen a story about a righteous paper hanger, somebody that cashes payroll checks. So having wrote $35,000 worth of payroll checks, and fought forest fires for a year for the state of California for 50 cents a day, I figured I had a lot of insight on, writing payroll checks. So I sat down and I started to write this story about writing payroll, this check passer. And in the interim, I come home from a meeting one night with this guy, and I had made it a point in my sobriety as much as possible to not know what people did for a living, because I'm easily affected by that. I used to be really affected. So I figured if I didn't know, I'd treat you equally. If I knew, I would play, one against the other. Like if I knew that John was a plumber and Sam was the vice president of Beverly Hills Bank, and John and Sam came up on 2 different occasions after the meeting and wanted to go to coffee, and the plumber is screwed. You know what I mean? I'll fix my own plumbing, but the bank I may need, so we'll go to coffee with a banker. So this guy I'd known for a couple of years was bringing me home from the meeting because I still didn't have a car. He says, what are you doing nowadays? I said, well, the first guy I told, I told 2 other AAs, and the response was so negative I gave up talking to them. They just agreed with my head. Oh, Jesus, you can't do that. It's easier to get response. You can get, never mind. No, it's really kind of sad, but my experience has been I can get more support for failure in AA than I can success. That will quiet a crowd. Right, lose it all, man. There's 150 people will take you to coffee. Make $250,000. See who's there that doesn't need you or want you, Lose it all. Come on, did you really lose it all? Everything? All of it? Even the new car? You only go have coffee? So anyway, I ride home with this guy, and he says, what are you doing? I said, I'm trying to write a story for TV. He says, oh, great, that's what I do. I said, what? He says, I write for television. See how hard I had to look for him? All the thinking, planning, scheming, maneuvering, manipulating I had to put into finding this guy. He says, look, when you get done with the story, give it to me. I'll read it if you want. And I'll give maybe, I can be some help, give you some pointers. I says, oh, geez, great. I finished my story. I give it to him. He reads it. He gave me a dozen points on it, that things, suggestions. I liked 6 of the 12. I made the 6 I liked, and I ignored the other 6, which I've since found out is just a matter of creative choice. I got it all done. He says to me, look, there's a girl on AA who, after hours, after she gets home from work, she does my typing for me. Would you like her to, type this for you? And I said, yes. Somebody's got to type it, because I don't think Universal knows that dead is spelled D-E-D. So he gives it to this girl to type, and I go through 3 days of anxiety, wondering, what's next, and how do we get it to the studio, and, all the wonderful fun stuff that we go through. And after about 3 days, this girl calls me on the phone. She says, hi. She says, geez, I just finished typing your story. She said, and I read it. She said, it's really very good. She said, did Jim tell you what I do, for a living? And I said, well, no, he didn't. She said, well, I'm secretary to the associate producer on Ironsides. See how hard I had to look for her? How much scheming and maneuvering and arranging and manipulating and planning I had to do to find her? She said, would you care if I took it in to the studio for you? Oh, no, not at all, please. Never show them you're happy. Keep them guessing, Guaranteed to wipe out a relationship. Anyhow, They buy the story, right? Now, I'm sitting with my friend who forgets how literal I am. I want to show you that you can be okay here, guys. We can really be okay here. We can just blunder along and we're better off than when we're planning carefully. Somebody said once, how do you determine God's will? The best description I've ever heard is go out the door, start moving, when you hit a wall, turn left. So he says to me, look, they're going to call you in the studio and the guy's going to ask you if you've ever written a script before. He says, tell him no, but tell him you'll do a better job for him than his hacks at the studio because it's more important to you than it is to them, and that they're only going to pay you $2,600 for the script anyway, and they piss that much away on a mistake on every show. Next day, I'm at Universal Studios, riding up in the Black Tower in the elevator with my little story in my hand, talking to God, saying, if you do not get off the elevator when I get off the elevator, I am in so much trouble I don't even want to think about it. I go in, I sit down in this guy's office, and what I don't know is that he's a fire burner, right? That he breathes fire, that everybody in the studio walks on eggshells around him, that he will destroy you or your career in 3 seconds flat if he has the opportunity, that he's just generally a bear. I don't know any of this, right? So I sit down in his office and he says exactly the words Jim said he would say. Have you ever written a script before? Well, I know what to say, so I say, no, but I'll do a better job for you than your hacks here at the studio. Because it's more important to me than it is to them, and you're only going to pay me $2,600 for the script, and you piss that much away on a mistake on every show. God truly loves children. There was about 10 seconds, 10 of the longest silent seconds of my life. This guy doesn't say a word, right? And then he starts to laugh. Because nobody's ever talked to him like that. So he says, go home and write me a script. So I went home and I wrote him a script. And I deliver it, and they love it, and they praise me for it, and it was a good script, and it was well written. And they said, well, look, you know, they took an option on me to maybe put me under contract for a year. And he said, after the show was all done and shot and finished, he said, let's do another one together. He said, go home, come up with another idea, come back on Wednesday, we'll talk, and we'll do another show. Well, this is a big honor that's being put on me. So I go home. All I had to do is come up with one idea, another idea for another TV show for Ironside's crime. I mean, my God, it's my home, right? Crime, right? I get home. This son of a bitch that has talked to me endlessly for 32 years, right? Has never shut up, even in my sleep. Has got more insane, sick fantasies and ideas than anything I've ever heard in my life. I go home and look for one rotten idea. Do you think it's got anything to say? No. I haven't been able to achieve silence that deep in meditation. It just quit. All it had to say to me is, well, you've heard about these writers that write one book. Well, dummy, you just written your one and only TV show. I go through 4 or 5 days of torture. Nothing. But by this time, the only one simple philosophy I've learned is show up. No matter what, even if you're not prepared, show up. So I go to Universal Studios knowing I'm about to experience one of the truly most humiliating moments of my life. I go in his office and I sit down and I'm like scared to death. I mean, I don't know what to do. I don't have idea one. Petrified. All I could do was turn it over and say, God, please. Not in public. Don't embarrass me in public. Embarrass me when I'm home alone. So the guy says, well, he says, got any ideas? And I go, well, I gave it a lot of he says, look, never mind. He said, I've been giving some thought to it. And he said, we're a strong enough show now and watched by a large enough audience. He said, I feel we have some social responsibilities. And he said, I think it's time that we did a really truthful, honest story about drug addiction and upper middle class teenagers. Why the hell couldn't I think of that? I'm the drug addict, for Christ's sakes. You know, you would have thought I could have come up with that one, you know. That wouldn't be asking too much of my mind, you know. It almost killed me with the disease for 11 years, and I can't even think of it for a story idea, for Christ's sake. So anyhow, you saw how hard I had to work to get the idea? All I did was show up, took my body in. I said to the guy, I said, oh, well, if we're going to do that, we should talk about right? I mean, just about halfway through the spiel about what we should say about narcotics addiction, he says, whoa, wait a minute. He said, how do you know so much about all this? It's one of the times when you're standing behind your mouth and you wish it would stop, you know. And I thought, well, there's one way to go here, man, and that's honesty. And I said, well, I'm a drug addict and alcoholic, drank and used for 11 years, ran the streets, smuggled narcotics, almost died. I said, I've been clean and sober through the programs of Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous for over 5 years. He says, oh, great. Goes right on with the conversation. That'd be good. It even gets better. About another 5 minutes in the conversation, he said, you won't be offended if we get a technical advisor, will you? I said, no, I won't. They got a narc from the valley that I had taken a shot at. He and I pretended the other one did not exist. Hi, how are you? Still a cop, huh? Still alive, huh? But I was having a few... So my writing career starts to go along, okay? I'll go along with the relationships that are going on at the same time, but we don't have 7 hours to do all this. And there's only one small problem going on, which I'm not really enjoying my career, but I don't know that I'm not enjoying my career. And one situation, I'm asked to write a script for a TV show in a hurry. I need the script in 4 days.
Sorry to interrupt your viewing. Taper Dave here. Just wanted to take a second to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel. Let me know if you like what you're listening. I've got some very good talks here, and this one's a great one. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Tell me what you think.
I said, okay, great. So I just locked up for 4 days, and I did the script, and I gave it to them, and I left town. I didn't even want to be around when they read it, right? And I went to Hawaii. I'm over in Hawaii, and I've been there 2 or 3 days, and I come back to this place with this friend that I'm staying with, and in the mailbox there's a letter for me from the producers of the show. And I take a letter out. I'm standing there with the envelope in my hand, and I'm looking at it like any good alcoholic. I'm reading through the envelope. And I know what the letter says, see? I know the letter says, that's got to be the worst piece of crap any human being in their life ever wrote. Not only will you never work for the show again, if we have anything to say about it, you'll never work for the studio again. So I'm still standing there staring at it, reading all this. The mind, always there to be helpful and supportive. Once again, self-esteem. So the girl standing with me says something ignorant like, why don't you open it? So I open it and I take the letter out, and the letter says, we want to take time to thank you for the script. It is truly one of the 2 finest scripts that have ever been written for this series. You have handled the story with such tenderness and delicacy and so much love that we are not going to rush it to production like originally planned. We will wait till you get back to make some minor changes, and then we will give it the care and the attention that it deserves. Thanks a lot. Signed, the producers of the show. My immediate thought was, at least they're not pissed off. It's kind of sad that at that time, probably 10 years sober, 12 years sober, I'm standing reading this letter. I've been working in the career then by 7 years, that I can't get excited. That I can't jump up in the driveway and go, all right, God, I'm a good writer, terrific, they loved it, yahoo, and run down the street and tell the neighbors, for Christ's sake. You know what I mean? That I can't really get some joy out of what I'm doing in my life. But the reason I can't is I have no self-esteem, right? That gets pointed up to me about 4 more years later than that. I'm at the studio one day, a friend of mine comes to visit me, who's sober about as long as I am, who's one of these guys who's not cool. He's just not cool. He just goes out there and enjoys life. He doesn't know how to look good, you know? And And he had never set foot on a studio lot, and he was driving me nuts, right? We're walking around the studio, and he's like a kid, you know. He's like, oh, wow, look at there. God, isn't that great? Terrific. It's fake, man. There's no back. Isn't that neat? Geez, that's what's her name. I saw her on, oh, what's her name? I mean, the whole studio can hear him, right? I'm going crazy. What am I going to do with this guy? I think, oh, God, I'll take him to lunch. I'll shut him up in the commissary. I get him in the commissary. He's worse than the commissary, right? Oh, God, there's the guys from MASH. Man, that's my favorite show. Oh, that's the doc, and that's the man. You know, Jesus, spare me, you know. Get him out. I think I'll take him down the stage and let him watch them do a special effects gag. Go to the stage. They do this great special effects stunt. It's all over. And this guy walks up to the special effects man and says, how did you do that? I'm thinking, God, did he have to do that? Do they know he's with me? You know. And I'm surprised to find out the special effects guy tells them. Not only does he tell them, he enjoys telling them. He has a great time telling them. Oh, well, we did this and that and and it got all done. And I thought, geez, you know, I didn't know how it was done because I never asked, you know. So finally I get this guy in a car, I get him off the lot, and I go back to my office, and I sit down in my office, and I'm sitting there, and I'm mad. I'm really angry because this friend of mine has just had more fun, more enjoyment, and more pleasure out of my career in 5 hours than I have had in 10 years. See? He had a good time. I hadn't had a good time. I drive into the studio in the mornings in terror that my parking space is going to be gone, and I'm unemployed. You know, is the sign still there? Oh, Jesus, it's okay. It's all right. I mean, that's how I'm living my life, with not a hell of a lot of self-esteem. Well, I hit 17 years of sobriety in this program, and I looked around and needed help. And there was nobody I could find to turn to, and nowhere I could find to go. And a friend of mine suggested that I go see a therapist. And I said, I think I will do that. I'm burned out. I can't go on one more step. I couldn't go on one more failed relationship. So I go see this therapist, and I sit down with this lady. And she said, tell me a little bit about yourself, starting with your childhood. I said, well, when I was 15, they threw me out of Manual Arts High School. I immediately discovered the wonderful world of narcotics and alcohol. I drank and used and smuggled narcotics and stole for 11 years, and I've been clean and sober in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous for 17 years. She looks at me and she says, I said, tell me about yourself starting with your childhood. You weren't born at 15. I said, Jesus, I don't remember anything before 15. She gave me that great look, right? You're like, oh, have we got one here, you know. And the interesting thing about this is that I had written probably 100 inventories in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I had read them diligently like you're supposed to your sponsors, and they all started at 15 years of age. But I was reading them to sponsors who couldn't remember back past 15 either, see? So they didn't think there was anything unusual about it. You know, nobody ever said, well, what about your childhood? Because they couldn't remember their own. You know, it was like we all had blank childhoods, and it was all fine. So I began the process with this lady of trying to find out why the hell I don't care about myself. Why at 17 years sober, why as a successful writer, why I have the basic attitude that I am a turd. I would like to find another description, I swear to God, but that's how I felt, you know, and I'm finally, so the lady says to me, well, one of the things we're going to have to do is get you in touch with your feelings. I go, huh? 17 years clean and sober, I'll tell you how far away I was from my feelings. I had sat in AA meetings for 17 years. I had listened to people get up at participation meetings and say, well, my boss walked in the office this morning and said, da-da-da-da-da-da, and he really hurt my feelings. I had absolutely no idea what they were talking about. No idea at all. I did not understand what having your feelings hurt meant. I never let anybody get that close. Well, we begin this process of therapy, and we start to look back into my childhood, which I find was a typical alcoholic childhood. Alcoholic father, neurotic mother, you know, raised with the absence of information that most of us in the 50s were raised with. And I reached a point, I will share one story about what puts me in touch with why I feel about myself the way I feel about myself. I started trying to run once a couple of years ago, but I got caught up with people that ran faster than I did, and I was having a lot of injuries, and I was tired all the time. I was wearing different shoes and getting blisters from these different shoes all the time and going crazy. And they said, well, what you got to do is you got to go see this podiatrist in Long Beach, California. He's a marathoner himself. He will make for you orthotics for your shoes. It'll fix you up and you'll be okay, because I'm running with this bent body, right? Well, I'm living in Santa Monica, and Long Beach is 40 miles away, maybe 30. And I think, well, Jesus, Long Beach is too far. I won't go to Long Beach. I'll go to somebody here close, right? So I go to Century City, and I go in this doctor's office, and I say, I need some orthotics made for running. And the guy says, well, I don't make them, but I'm going to have a girl here in the practice with me in a month. She makes them. Now, normally, under any circumstances, the minute he says I don't make them, I would say, oh, geez, the door's closed, right? There's a wall. He doesn't make them. I waited a month for this girl, right? She made them. She made them. I ran 3 miles, went home, sat down, got up an hour later, and couldn't walk. My back was out, right? I'm limping along now, trying to run, crippled up, and they're saying to me, look, where you got to go is to Pasadena, the best sports medicine doctors in Southern California and Pasadena. They work with the Olympic runners. Go see them. They will put you back in shape immediately. Well, if Long Beach is far, Pasadena is further, So I'll go to the marina and see this chiropractor in the marina who's 40 pounds overweight. His eyes glaze over when you mention the word running. He has no idea what the hell he's doing, right? See, now the tragedy here is, if you came to me, you walked up to me and said, look, some friends have suggested that I go see these sports medicine doctors in Pasadena tomorrow, and I don't have a car. Would you take me? I would take you. I would drive you. It's me I won't drive. Me I'm going to take to the quack down the road, right? Because I'm not worth driving to Pasadena. So this fruitcake keeps putting my back in. I keep running 9 miles and throwing it out, and it just gets to the point where finally I get in the car and I drive myself to Pasadena out of sheer desperation. They put my back in shape, and I go see this podiatrist in Long Beach. One progression follows the other. He takes my shoes off. He looks at my feet. He looks at my right foot. He says, your right foot is practically a club foot. I said, oh, yeah? He says, yeah. How'd it happen? I says, I don't know. I said, when did it happen? He said, probably when you were a child. I said, really? He said, yeah. So I go home, and I don't feel good. I'm sick at my stomach. I'm driving in the car, and I'm angry, and I don't feel well, and I'm sick, and I want to cry, and I don't know why, I don't know what's going on. And I get home, and I sit down, and I'm just kind of really ill. And my mother calls. God's sense of timing is wonderful. She had just come from her foot doctor and is bitching about how he cut her toenails wrong. And when she gets all done bitching about how her toenails have been cut wrong, I said, while we're on the subject of feet, did I ever have any problems with my feet when I was small? And she said, well, yes. As a matter of fact, she said you had very high arches when you were a little boy. And she said they required special shoes to support the high arch. And these shoes were very expensive. And in the next 5 minutes in the conversation, she repeated about 5 times how expensive these shoes were for my arches. The next morning, I'm driving in, and I hang up the phone and I want to throw up. I don't know why. I'm just really sick. And the next day, I go in to see my therapist. I said, I don't know what's wrong. I'm ill. I'm angry. I'm crazy. And I can't put it together. And she says, well, let's just go back and let's see what we can find. Let's see what's back there. So we went back. And what we found was this 2.5-year-old little boy with blonde hair and blue eyes and just adorable, standing in a hallway in that little building in Denver, Colorado, and he's got tears streaming down his face, and he's talking to his mother. And he's telling his mother that his right foot hurts because the shoe is too small. And his mother is telling him that, shh, don't talk so loud. Your father will hear, and if he has to spend more money, he will be angry. And I go, I got it. I understand now. If I'm not worth buying shoes for that fit, how the hell can I be worth much of anything to anybody? And what I have discovered through this process, which is really interesting, we talk a lot in AA about how the newcomer is the most important person in the room. And it sounds wonderful, but I guess for me, if I view AA as a furnace that needs coals to keep it going, then that philosophy is correct. Because what I believe is this, that the single, without exception, the single most important person in this room sits in your chair. There is nobody in this room more important than you are. If you don't learn to take care of you, nobody is going to do it for you. And if we don't... And if we don't take care of ourselves, there's not going to be anybody around for the newcomer when he shows up at the door anyway, you see? It's like, you say, what's my life like today? Okay, let's see, well, how old am I? I guess I'll be 48 this December. 21 years sober, and I don't, you want to hear the things I don't do to make you really uncomfortable? I don't smoke, I don't eat meat, I don't eat sugar, I don't eat salt, I don't drink Diet Colas, I don't drink coffee, the list goes on. I'm in the best health of my life at 48 years of age. Now, Lily, that makes you a little bit uncomfortable. Yeah, right. That's right. And ain't nobody doing it for me either, sucker. The only gets up at 6 a.m. and goes pounds the roads is me, and I don't want to go a lot of mornings. The mind is always there to support me. You don't want to go. You're sick, you're tired, your back hurts, your foot sore, When I get out there to run, the only one that doesn't want me running is me. Everybody else, hi, how are you? Have a great run. My mind, don't go. You're going to kill yourself today. You're going to drop dead. You'll be an AA, died of a heart attack running down the road, One of the things I've discovered for me, and this is critical for me in this program, is this. You come in, take a few inventories, and people say, oh, yeah, well, as far as your parents are concerned, forgive them. They did the best job they could do with the information they had. Bless them and forgive them. So they say, oh, yeah, okay, Mom, Dad, great, man, you're blessed, you're forgiven. On the road you go. And you continue to lose jobs and have failed relationships and be generally tormented and have a lot of anxiety and unable to communicate with people, totally frozen, unable to live life, in a lot of pain because of resistance. Pain only comes from resistance. There is no pain in change, and there's no pain in growth. The pain comes in the resistance to the growth or in the resistance to the change. Once you let go with the change, it's all fun. Say, oh God, why did I do this before? This is after you've been drugged, screaming, I don't want to go, not me, no. So I forgave my folks, but I was always miserable and I couldn't figure out why. What I'm convinced now is there's two parts to that issue. To the whole question of Mom and Dad and us, okay? And it's this. Yes, I stand here tonight, and I still have trouble with my sweet, gray-headed little old mother. 90 minutes, I'm fine. 91 minutes, and I want to kill her. That's the best I can do is 90 minutes, and I can't do any better than that. Even Christmas, I might get 2 hours in for Christmas. So I look at them, and I say, okay, they did the very best job they could do with the information they had. They did to me what was done to them. That is the honest-to-God truth. They couldn't have done it any better than they did it because they didn't have any information to do it any better with. So that's part one. Part two is, although they did the best job they could do, they did a rotten fucking job. And as long as I think the job they did was terrific, then I think I'm a turd. That's the reality of that one, right? The best example of that I know is of here about a year ago, a gal on the program was celebrating her first birthday, and her mother, who had 4 years, called her. Listen carefully, guys. This is one of the best conversations I've ever heard. She calls her daughter and she says to her, on this your birthday, I want you to know that I am fully aware that I am responsible for the majority of the problems you have in your life today. She said, but please, for your sake, understand you are responsible for the solutions to those problems. That's what it's about. And I got to believe, based on my experience and my life in the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, if you're willing to just take a quiet moment, even if it's in screaming desperation, and take your Father's hand and know how important you are, it will work out nothing but wonderful. God bless you.
We hope you've enjoyed this recording. To obtain additional copies, receive a free catalog of AA and Al-Anon talks, or to find out about our Tape and CD of the Month Club, call Encore Audio Archives at 1-800-878-1308, or visit our website at www.12steptapes.com.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with, and it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs, long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down. And then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.